What's up, guys? Welcome back to Classic Octane. I am Taylor. So I'm waiting on some parts for the CB750 build. So I'm gonna kind of push forward and do some work on the LS swap. So what I want to do today is get the flywheel and clutch installed. I'm going to show you guys some issues I ran into pulling out the original pilot bearing. And then we have a new slave cylinder with a remote clutch bleeder line. I want to get all that set up. And hopefully by the end of the episode, we'll have the transmission and everything mounted to the motor, ready to be dropped into the Camaro as one unit. So I wanted to mention an issue I ran into, so hopefully I can stop one of you guys from making the same mistake I did. So when I went to go pull out the original pilot bushing in here, it was super stuck. I actually broke one of those cheap Harbor Freight slide hammers trying to get in here and pull it out. So I was kind of looking up other options. I kind of remembered somebody mentioning you can use kind of hydraulic pressure. You can either kind of fill this little cavity with grease or a wet paper towel, or I've heard it all the way to slices of bread. Basically anything that you can kind of stick through this hole, fill it up, and then use like your clutch alignment tool or a proper size bolt to tap it in. Basically, once the cavity is filled, it starts to, need to go somewhere, so it pushes your bearing out from the outside. That sounds great in theory, but this is an LS1, so I assume it's similar on most LS motors. If your pilot bushing is very stuck, you see that kind of shiny bit through the hole there? That is an oil cap that actually taps into the back of the crank. And if you're like me, your pilot bushing is so tight that instead of pushing that out, it actually pops the cap in, causing all of that wet paper towel, which is what I was using, to fall directly inside the engine. So it basically caused an hour and a half more of work, because I had to pull the motor back up, pull the oil pan off, clean out all the crap, get that plug, make sure the plug was still good. You can buy replacements if it's bent. And then reinstall the plug. So don't do that. Don't try to use the hydraulic pressure. Some people have had good luck, and what I think they probably got lucky with this last connecting rod. If the connecting rod is right in the correct spot, I think it will actually stop that plug from being able to be pushed all the way in. But in my case, it was not. So I went to Napa, rented a pilot bearing removal tool and their larger slide hammer, and yanked it out without much fuss. So I would just, do the right thing and rent the tool. It doesn't cost you any money. It's probably better than adding another hour and a half of work. So now that we have that done, I'm ready to install my clutch. I obviously do have the new pilot bearing already installed. Just tapped it back into place and went super easy. So I am using a spec Super Twin clutch I picked up from a buddy of mine. It's way overkill for our current power level, but if I end up wanting to turbo this thing or something down the road and want to make 700, 800, 900 horsepower, this clutch will handle up to, I think, 11 or 1400 foot-pounds of torque. So we are going to have plenty of clutch to go around, but the twin disc supposedly keeps the stock drivability as far as like pedal pressure. If you've ever driven like a high-performance clutch that's like a single disc, you know that your left leg will be huge because they are super hard to push in. So I have my Loctite ready to go, flywheel, so I'm going to put the flywheel up there. We'll throw our bolts in, and then I got to look up what the torque spec is so we can get it tightened down. All right, our torque spec is going to be 74 foot-pounds, so let me just throw this in place, and then we will rotate it around until our little kind of dowel hole lines up. I'm going to throw a bolt up here on the top just to hold it while I Loctite and install the rest of them. Got them all torqued down. Basically, I just clipped a vice grip around the ring gear, and then it just rests up against that dowel and gives you just enough pressure to hold it in place from turning around. Crisscross pattern, 74 foot-pounds. We are ready to install the clutch. All right, for the clutch, I have the whole pack kind of put together here. I'm going to throw my alignment tool. Like that. And there's a #1 mark on this piece, #1 mark on the flywheel. So we'll need to just make sure to get those lined up with the little dowel. And have our alignment tool actually go into the pilot bushing. Looks good to me. Let me throw in one of the bolts. We'll be Loctiting these as well, but just so it can hold it. In place. I think our pressure plates are, our friction discs are lined up properly. There we go. Now it's all the way into the pilot bushing. Okay. Everything seems to be flush. Cool. Should be able to Loctite, and these get tightened down to 30 foot-pounds. All our socket head Allens are torqued down to 30 foot-pounds. Did a crisscross as well. So it should be good to go. If you see, our clutch alignment tool goes all the way in, comes all the way out nice, despite having the end broken off. So I'm going to leave that in just for now. Make sure while we move this thing around, nothing moves, but those plates should be nice and tight in there. So per the spec instructions, this clutch pack does not need to be shimmed. So normally you would take like a flat, straight edge and measure like the distance from the slave cylinder and kind of make sure you have like, whatever 150 thousandths or whatever the measurement is of play. But I guess because the design of this or whatever reason, you don't need to do that. So we're not going to. Feels a little bit weird, but let's go ahead and slide the transmission out here. I'll show you a little modification I did to change the shifter, and then we'll show you the other parts we have for it. So here's all the transmission parts I'm going to be using. So if you're not familiar or haven't been watching this series, this LS1 and T56 came out of a 2004 GTO. Pulled it out of a running driving car. So because it is a GTO T56, I need to change this shifter bushing in here. So that we can just run a standard F-body, 98 to 02 or 97 to 02, whatever it is, Camaro, so that we can just have more options for shifting. So I bought this shifter bushing, and then also this shifter itself from Hawks Motorsports. Not sponsored or anything. Just looked like a good quality billet aluminum shifter with nice kind of short throws. So basically all you have to do is tap out this little roll pin right here. Just take a punch, tap it out, you slide off the original one, slide this one on, tap the roll pin back on. That gives you the proper bushing cup. Then you can use, like I just mentioned, any F-body Camaro shifter, and it will just bolt right up. So we'll use that. For the hydraulic clutch conversion, because obviously this is going into my 69 Camaro, and that's a manual clutch, so we went with a McLeod setup. It seems like it's going to be really good quality. I don't think I'm going to even need this pedal because my car is already manual, so I think I can just hook the master cylinder up to my stock clutch pedal, but we'll have to figure that out. Only thing I didn't like or decided to change on this kit was the 4AN line that goes from the master cylinder down to your slave cylinder. I think it was going to be too short. So I went ahead and picked up a longer, I think this is 24-inch 4AN line. So we got that ready to go. I also picked up, these are from Russell, the little papers around here somewhere with what the part number is right here. So what that's going to allow me to do is convert this line into a 4AN line. So we'll be able to connect everything up. Then this piece is a remote bleeder. So normally these throwout bearings or slave cylinders only have a bleeder that's this long, which is like almost impossible to bleed while it's in the car. It's a huge pain. So you're able to kind of unscrew that and then get this long remote bleeder line that will run outside of the bell housing, and we'll zip tie it, you know, somewhere underneath the car. That way we can easily bleed the clutch once it's all installed. So the next step here is going to be tapping out this little roll pin so we can pull this out and install our 4AN adapters. So once you tap the little roll pin out, this is the piece that slides out. And you can see how this is designed to be the same on this side and then be 4AN on that side. So now I'm just going to put a tiny bit of grease around that little seal. We'll be able to slide that back in, tap the roll pin back in, and then our slave cylinder will be ready to install. So new slave cylinder is installed, and then you can see now we have two 4AN lines coming out through each hole. We'll just kind of zip tie these out of the way for now. Like I mentioned earlier, one of them is the bleed, this guy, and this guy will run up to our clutch master cylinder, but of course not until all of this is in the car. So in theory, we should be ready to flip this around, pull out our alignment tool, and mate these two things together. All mounted together, went together without much of a fuss. I kind of was able to just get it lined up and then get a couple of the bolts started and to just slowly tighten the bolts more and more just to kind of suck it into that pilot bushing. But yeah, no complaints. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of zip tie these lines just up nice and tight on the side of the trans over there. I went ahead and threw the shifter on just to keep dust and stuff out of there while the transmission is still kind of just sitting in storage. I don't think I have anything left to do on the trans right now. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to knock out today. I think we'll dive into something that's unrelated to the transmission, but my ECU, I'm running the MS3 Gold Box from EFI Source. I probably would have run the new Terminator X from Holley, but I bought this before that came out. And there is not a provision in the wiring harness I got from them for the oil pressure sensor. So I'm going to probably go to the GTO I still have outside, see if I can locate the plug for that, and maybe just chop off, you know, a foot of wire. That way we'll have some actual plug and everything to hardwire into one of the auxiliaries in the Gold Box. So just want to make sure I knock that out. I think everything else has all of the connections and everything else that we need. But I don't want to get rid of that GTO until the swap's completely done, just for little parts and pieces like that. So I was looking for the oil pressure plug on the GTO, and it turns out it is part of this factory harness that I pulled out. It's this little guy right back here. So instead of chopping up this harness, I want to keep this as a complete original harness with ECUs and everything, so that we can potentially use that in a project in the future. We can sell it as a unit, whatever. It makes more sense for me to just pay like $6 on Amazon and get an oil pressure plug for that. Once I get that, we should have all the wiring and everything sorted out. I mean, we should be pretty much ready to go, which means we need to clear the space for it. So in the next video on this project, it will most likely be pulling the drivetrain out of the Camaro. We got to pull the whole, from the radiator, engine, transmission, drive shaft, and the entire rear end out of this car, because all of it's getting replaced. If you didn't know, or this is your first video on this, we are doing the LS T56, obviously, and then I'm doing a 9-inch in the back. So everything's going to be solid built, handled, you know, well over 1,000 horsepower. We'll just be running a small cam and stuff in it to start off with, so we'll be in the like 350 or 400 horsepower range. But I'm sure that won't last for all that long. We'll want to bump it up. So that'll be the next video on this project. I am about to start working on a Will It Run project. If you see over there, I have a 50 Ford truck, not my personal truck, friend of a friend. Went and pulled it out of his barn a couple of weeks ago, and I have all the parts and oil and everything right here to see if we can't get that thing running. So it's been about a decade, maybe a little bit less, since it's been running, so hopefully it won't be too terrible to get back on the road. But he's got a couple of projects that we'll probably end up working on over the next couple of months. So that'll be a Will It Run Wednesday, potentially next Wednesday, worst case scenario, the one after that, but within the next like 2 weeks you should see that. And then of course tons of motorcycle content coming as well. I have a customer coming this afternoon to drop off another project that we can do a Will It Run on, and we're going to be doing some other stuff that I think you guys are going to be interested in. So appreciate you guys watching, and hope you enjoyed this shorter video of me getting the LS ready to stab in the car, and I'll see you guys soon.